We are going to start the session third. The theme of the session third is India-Central Asia relation, culture, and people-to-people relations. And it's my privilege to invite, as a chair of Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former Ambassador of India to Kazakhstan. We have four speakers in this session. We have Kyrgyzstan, Mr. Evgeny Kablukov. And we have Tajikistan from Mr. Mamurdzhon Mirvaisov. And we have from India, Professor Warikoo and Professor Sanjay Pandey. So I will now forward to you to hand over the proceedings. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you very much, Puneet, and thank you to the ICWA for organizing this. Friends, a very warm and cordial welcome to you to the post-lunch session. I think if I were to pose this question to you as to who all would be interested in going out and basking in the sun on the terrace, I'm sure I would have consensus. On other subjects, there might not be consensus, but on this, there definitely will be consensus, and it would be in the affirmative, so I'm not going to ask you that question. And we are going to continue here, meaning after this very sumptuous and generous lunch that has been provided by the ICWA. I'm sure all of us could do with a bit of rest and relaxation. But I think with the galaxy of speakers that we have today, you will all be, we will all give riveted attention to whatever they say. So a very warm welcome. And the subject also is particularly interesting. It is about people-to-people contacts and cultural relations between India and Central Asia. And we have discussed connectivity, we have discussed defense and security ties. This would fall more into the area of soft power diplomacy in terms of reaching out to the countries. And I would dare say that the relations between India and Central Asia, and we call this region a part of our extended neighborhood, that really started in antiquity. The historical relations, cultural, civilizational ties that we have with the region really started several millennia ago. Even if you look at the Silk Route, which started from 3rd century BCE till about 15th century CE, that is about 1800 years or so. And there we had an exchange, a very rich exchange of not only goods, but several, it is thoughts, it is ideas, it is philosophy. In fact, Buddhism traveled from India to this part of the world, and from there it found its way to Western China. So the exchange of ideas and the exchange of thoughts and the people-to-people contacts through the caravans, through the sarais that used to go from here, that kept on happening for several centuries and thousands of years. So that is really the platform, that is really the foundation, that is really the basis of this relationship. And I think the challenge would be as to how to revive all this in the modern day context, in the current day context. There have been, even after the we did away with the Silk Road, we had the maritime route that was discovered in the late 15th century. But still, even in somewhat modern times, even in Soviet era, we had very good contacts, we had very good relations with countries of the region, whether it is through culture, it is through dance, it is music, it is literature, it is poetry. There was, and even in terms of these Soviet Federal Socialist Republics had their own sister state relationship with many of the Indian states. So that was, in the days of yore, in past, there were no problems of connectivity. But today, as it was mentioned, connectivity does create obstacles and difficulties as far as commerce is concerned, as far as defense and security is concerned, and definitely also as far as culture and people-to-people contact are concerned. But of course, there is an underlying strong sense of affinity in the Central Asian countries. I think all of us from India have been to Central Asia, and we would always have felt a very instantaneous connect with the people there, because there is so much of knowledge, so much of information. But I think under the current day context, when there is so much of, there are so many options that are available to our friends in Central Asia. It is not only India that they can look out to, because in the Soviet time, it was only India that was really available to them. But right now, I think the whole world is your crucible, and you can sort of, go out, travel out. So I think in that sense, the challenge becomes all that much more as far as India is concerned. Definitely, one of the aspects which I have found when I was either as ambassador of India to Kazakhstan, or even when I have traveled to all the other Central Asian states, is that there is still a huge lack of information, of the up-to-date information, of the current day information as to what is happening in India. And as Secretary West, Ambassador Sanjay Verma said in the morning, there is a revolution taking place in India, in every sense of the word. And in that sense, people-to-people contact would be one excellent way of knowing more about each other. And also from India to go there, I don't only speak about our friends from Central Asia coming here and knowing more about India. India has a lot to offer, but Central Asia also has a lot to offer. We, at times, most of the time, we speak about Central Asia as such. But all these countries are very, very different. All of us who've been there, we realize that all of these countries are very different from each other. And so they need to be looked at also individually, as a whole, as a region, but definitely also as individually. And I think that is what we need to do. In terms of people-to-people contact, this was a very rewarding and a satisfying information that in the India Central Asia Summit that took place earlier this year on 27 January, it was decided to establish also that there would be regular interaction and meeting between the culture ministers and the tourism ministries, because that is what is going to provide an impetus to the people-to-people contact. And I think tourism definitely has a very important role to play, a very significant role to play. It was also heartening to hear this morning that India and 4 of the Central Asian republics, 4 of the 5 Central Asian republics, we have direct air connectivity between each other. We might not have contiguous borders, we might not have sharing the same land boundaries, but as far as air connectivity is concerned, there are 4 of the Central Asian countries with whom we have air connectivity. And I was talking both to our friends from Uzbekistan as also friends from Kazakhstan. And I think today we are still not at the same level of air connectivity that prevailed in the pre-COVID times, but still we are fast approaching that. And I think this is definitely one way to go forward. I know that Kazakhstan has opened up to Indian tourists. You can go there for 14 days without a visa. Uzbekistan has opened up to tourism in a big way. So, and of course, as far as India is concerned, we do provide e-visas to our friends coming from Central Asian countries. So I think this is definitely a very important route to take. And this would also, in a very significant way, also bring down the information gap or the information divide between Central Asia and India. Because as people travel, they see, they meet, they travel around, they will see what are also the opportunities that they have to cooperate and collaborate in other areas. Let me stop my introduction here. I'm told, and I'm sure every one of us realizes, that we are running very much, we are very short of time. We are running against time. So what I'm going to do is, although we have four, as I was mentioning, towering personalities really in their own fields. I know two of them from India and my friend from Kyrgyzstan, and I'm sure I don't have the slightest doubt that the fourth speaker also is an equally compelling speaker. So we have four of them, but what I'm going to request is that if you could kindly limit your presentations to about 8 minutes, if possible, and I will, after about 6 or 7 minutes, I will, yes, please, I will indicate to you. I know, when you're talking about cultures, you sort of, just come into your element in the first 10 minutes. So I think it is very unfair to tell you to sort of, complete your presentation in 7, 8 minutes. But I'm sure, looking at how late we are, and we have one session more and also a validity session. So I will first call upon Professor Evgeny Kablukov. He's the acting professor, Faculty of International Relations and Oriental Studies, Kyrgyz National University, Bishkek, and you'll speak on India, Central Asia, cultural relations, history and perspectives. You have the floor, sir.
Your Excellency, you said a lot about cultural relations and the people-to-people contacts. That's why I think that 8 minutes for me it will be enough to add to your words. Certainly I prepared my report certainly with some discourse to history, but I will keep it aside, and I will focus on one aspect of culture, which is very important now. Today, I may say that culture is making a comeback as a factor in international relations, and especially in international business. For our country, for example, people-to-people contacts means that businessmen can come and in the search of partners. And they are the first pioneers on these people-to-people contacts. And nowadays, culture makes great importance in international business. In the last century, most Western policymakers presumed that certain universal human traits govern international affairs. Culture was seen only as an incomprehensible wild card of little relevance to international relations. The behavior of states was simply individual self-interest writ large. But now states define their interests, and whether rationally is always the driver is not being questioned. Today, power shifts, however, gave far more complex implications than last centuries. Samuel Huntington's highly publicized Clash of Civilization analysis draws our attention to an often ignored aspect of international relations, culture. Today's emerging power encompasses entire civilization, some with thousands of years of cultural continuity. While Japan's modernization, beginning with the Meiji Restoration in 1868, included an adoption of Western foreign policy institutions, the same may not be true for India. The modern-day global economy is a potpourri of diverse cultures, etiquettes, ideas, customs, and social behavior. As the global marketplace grows and accommodates cross-cultural and multinational business and teams, cultural sensitivity is a priority to ensure international success. Understanding the role and importance of culture in international business is essential to overcoming cultural barriers that impede business growth and development. To sum up, many businesses failed because of neglect of important factor, culture. I may say one example. In my third visit to India, it was in 1991, September, October, I went as interpreter with some tough businessmen from Kyrgyzstan. Our hosts met us at the airport, put us into the hotel. I still remember the name of the hotel, Amrapali. It's a famous name in India. Yeah? And we agreed that the next day they will come at 10 o'clock and we will discuss and start negotiations. We got up in the morning, took lunch, 10 o'clock, we are waiting, 11, 12, 1 p.m., no one came. Okay, we decided to take lunch. We informed the receptionist that we are in the restaurant taking lunch. We returned at 2, nobody. No one came. 2 o'clock, no one. At 3 o'clock, at last, they came. And my businessman was very angry and upset. And how can I deal with these people who make such arrangements? You know, it took me a very long time to persuade him to continue negotiations, and then began to explain him that about Indian Standard Time and so on and something like that. And certainly they agreed. He agreed, and several days we negotiated and reached some results. In establishing business relations with foreign enterprises, regardless of their size, one should budget expenditures on the research on the business partner's culture. This will allow for gaining insight into cultural differences, existing customs, shared values, gestures used, management styles, rules applicable in marketing and other elements of culture. You know, I took with myself this very interesting book, Inside the Indian Business Mind. And everybody who will read this book will have some information what is inside Indian business mind. Yeah, but can we tell it about Central Asian business mind? We have no such, unfortunately, publications. That's why another sphere of cooperation. Yeah. This is quite true concerning Central Asian businesses in their relations with India. The influence of culture in the future will be felt a few layers deeper. It will make an impact through values. Significance of culture has been experienced in history to this day, and it continues to be increasingly significant in the coming period. In the future, alliances are just as likely to be forged along lines of cultural understanding, either on economic or geographical ones. Conducting international business involves entering new markets. Businessmen must display sensitivity towards different cultures when dealing with foreign clients or planning a marketing campaign for their foreign subsidiaries. Business executives should start by studying the local market's beliefs, values, and customs. Communication methods vary across cultures, so understanding the language and communicational style of your target market or business partner is an excellent way to bridge cultural gap in the international business arena. I remember that in Bishkek, my also very tough businessman asked me to invite some persons from Indian embassy for the meeting. We decided, okay, 2 o'clock p.m. we will be there. The same time, the same way, it was Indian Standard Time. Indian colleagues came 10, 15 minutes later, but my friend was very tough and he refused to talk to them. And I could not persuade him to continue. And that's why, once again, I just want to stress that culture is becoming very, very important, especially international business. But international business nowadays is a very important factor which unites people. And here I understand that, as you said, people-to-people contacts, people-to-people contacts are very, very important. And we should start from, yes, people-to-people contacts, but they should be professionals, businessmen, writers, journalists, and so on. That, in this way, it will work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is a fascinating presentation you made, because I think we were talking about culture in terms of artists, in terms of poets, etc. What our distinguished colleague ambassador from Tajikistan mentioned about so many cultural personalities and how we share between India and Central Asia, particularly Tajikistan, so many of them. But you've added a new facet to it. What I can tell you is that, you know, this business meeting might have got delayed in 1991. Today it will not get delayed. I think Indian businessmen will come at 9:30 if they have committed at 10 o'clock, because they are very serious. And I'm a little surprised because, you know, businessmen are one thing, diplomats are another. And if you are, and I'm sure Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh will, you know, corroborate my statement that, you know, when diplomats give a time, they will be there 5 minutes early rather than being 1 minute late. So, you know, this is definitely the. But as you said, you don't have a book of this nature in Central Asia. So I think if going forward you are looking for a project, I think you can take up this project and write something about what is in a Central Asian business mind. But thank you very much for this very novel and unique perspective on the issue of culture and business. Now let me invite Professor Mamurdzhon Mirvaisov, Head of the Department of International Relations, Academy of Sciences of the Republic of Tajikistan. You are the first one. 8 minutes, please.
Thanks, dear Chairman, dear colleagues and friends. Allow me on behalf of the authorities of National Academy of Science and on my own behalf, cordially greet and all participants of this international conference, which is held by Indian Council of World Affairs, with which we have a tight and very close, fruitful cooperation. We consider that such events are a favorable condition and serve as an excellent platform for the development of humanitarian cooperation between our friendly countries. I am sure that the focus of the participants in this section of the conference is the assessment of the current state and possible prospects for the development of scientific and cultural cooperation between the countries of the region on an equal and mutually beneficial basis, taking into account the interests of the parties. Dear participants, it should be recognized that over the past 2 decades, India's foreign policy and international role in the world stage has changed markedly. And therefore, we scholars easily distinguish between traditional India and India in the last 20 years. The main factors that led to the noticeable progress in the Indian position were the development of its economy, technological advance, and finally the recognition by other countries of the positive change that have occurred in the state's foreign policy. At present, scientific cooperation between Tajikistan and India is actively developing, both directly and within the framework of regional and international organizations. The authorities of the Academy of Science attach a great importance to the improvement of the existing and the creation of a new effective mechanism for scientific and humanitarian cooperation with the scientific institution of India. On February 1993, both sides stated their intention to establish a Tajik-Indian intergovernmental Commission for Trade, Economic, Scientific, and Technical Cooperation in accordance with the Joint Declaration on Means and Areas of Cooperation between the Republic of Tajikistan and the Republic of India. In accordance with the agreement between the government of the Republic of Tajikistan and the government of the Republic of India, the Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, and Technical Cooperation, the first meeting was held in 2001 in the New Delhi. in New Delhi. Up to date, the Commission has held more than 20 meetings to discuss issues and the ways to strengthen mutual beneficial cooperation. To date, more than 20 legal acts have been signed between scientific institutions and organizations of our countries, which determine the priority areas of scientific and technical cooperation between the Republic of Tajikistan and the Republic of India. We are aware that today the main trends in the world development are the integration and expansion of scientific and technical ties. This explains the implementation of joint projects with the help of our Indian partners. An important impulse for the development and deepening of the scientific cooperation between our friendly countries became the agreement between the government of Tajikistan and the government of India on the Interstate Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific and Technical Cooperation. The following normative acts signed and ready for signing are considered as a logical continuation of the close interaction between scientific institutions of two countries. It's a memorandum of understanding between National Academy of Science and Indian Council for World Affairs, which was signed in 2006, and protocol of cooperation between Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology of India and National Academy of Science of Tajikistan, and MOU between Indian Council of Social Science Research and National Academy of Science, and agreement on scientific cooperation between the National Academy of Science of Tajikistan and Gandhi Institute of Technology and Management, and updated MOU between National Academy of Science and Indian Council for World Affairs, which is ready for signing. It has become a tradition to hold joint scientific conferences and seminars and roundtables with the participation of scientists from two countries, and monthly, every month in Academy of Science at Institute of Asian and European Studies is organized seminars with the participation of our Indian partners, Indian scholars. It's as online and in offline regime. And study of Indian citizens in universities of Tajikistan, and holding research and scholars from National Academy of Science in short-term and long-term course within the framework of ITEC, ICCR program and study in India program, and on the basis of existing agreements, also indicate that the leadership of two countries attach special importance to strengthening scientific cooperation between friendly republics. Taking into account the state of scientific cooperation as well as the existing scientific and technical potential of both countries in conducting scientific research and the achievements of Tajik scientists in the field of seismology, geology, astrophysics, and other branches of natural and technical sciences, we are ready to strengthen collaboration in these fields. These technologies are remote sensing, seismic assessment, earthquake prediction, green and alternative energy astronomy studies, and researches with the participation of Tajik and Indian scientists in the astronomical observatories and the National Academy of Science, which are considered unique in the world due to their location in highly mountain areas, and organization of joint scientific expeditions, and on regular basis holding joint seminars and conferences, and promote the training of scholars and young researchers, and publication of scientific statements and literature, as well as cooperation in the field of humanities on the following topics is a mutual cooperation within the framework of regional organization and initiatives, situation in researches concerning situation in Afghanistan, and joint studies of the history, archaeology, ethnography, and folklore of two countries. And it's, I want to note that by National Academy of Science nowadays is implementing a huge project which calls as a heritage of Great Khorasan all over the archives of the world. And through this project, we are going to collaborate with our Indian partners in order to study, to research on the manuscripts and heritage which are in Indian universities, archives, in libraries, in order to research and to work on them together. And it should be emphasized that the functioning of the Indian Cultural Center, named after Rahul Sankrityan, and the name of Central Scientific Library of the National Academy of Science, named after Indira Gandhi, testify that the high degree of scientific cooperation between the scientific institution of Tajikistan and India. In conclusion, I want to note that the relations between Tajikistan and India have not only historical roots that go back to centuries, but also has a modern solid foundation as well as far-reaching prospects. In this context, we see a wide field for the multi-faced and mutually beneficial cooperation between our countries in the present and in the future. Thanks for attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Mirvaisov. Your presentation is very encouraging and very inspiring that there is so much happening on the India-Tajik cultural cooperation front. And I don't think, I was not really aware of many of these aspects. I'm sure my colleague Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, because she has signed very many agreements, ICWA has signed many agreements with the National Academy of Sciences, she would have been aware. But there is such a large plethora of agreements and MOUs. I only would sincerely wish and hope that they are being implemented and that action is being taken. I'm sure as far as ICWA is concerned, you mentioned that there are regular meetings and interactions, but with all the other partners, MOU partners, also I would sincerely hope that this is happening with ICCR ITEC scholarships in a variety of areas. You mentioned about disaster relief, and I'm sure you are aware that there are several new initiatives that have been taken by India. For instance, the launch of what is known as the CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and so these are also other areas that you could look at and participate in. Thank you very much, and also thank you for sticking to the 8-minute time limit. I appreciate that. Now I come to the two Indian speakers. First, Professor Warikoo. He is retired from the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and currently he is Secretary General of the Himalayan Research and Cultural Foundation. You will speak on revitalizing India-Central Asia cultural ties. 8 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, madam, for inviting me for this very important seminar. I would, while recapitulating our geocultural affinity and long tradition of historical cultural context dating back to antiquity between India and Central Asia, I would specifically point out, like you specifically point out, that your Academy of Sciences is working on a project to work out or restore or to record the heritage, tangible or intangible. Here I was, in I think 2011 or 12, I spent around 15 days in Garno Badakhshan, traveled to that area. So I found, to my surprise, two ancient ruins, Kushan forts, Kakaha and Chunchun, or I forget the other name. Two forts are lying there. I don't know what is the shape now, after 10 years now. So I tried to raise this issue with so many people here, but there is some need to restore them, to restore their original semblance of a fort, and putting a plaque, and then in a village Zong onwards, there is the ruin, which is totally ruined. There is nothing excepting the spot, stupa, ancient Buddhist stupa, some Japanese. So if you enable, or if there is some arrangement to, recreate these two Kushan forts and that stupa, these will become two heritage centers, like these will become two centers of important cultural tourism, and will bring business and money and tourists to Tajikistan. Same thing, I was in Kazakhstan, in Kazgu, Kazakhstani National University, Al-Farabi. So in the class I was teaching the scholars there, I just mentioned I had heard about Tamgalitas, around 2000 years old, the monument, the Buddhist sculpture, petroglyphs, and the stones. So I just mentioned to the class, so the students, they had heard some because Chokhan Wali Khano had written about it in his 19th century memoir. He had made some sketches. So they had heard something about it. And one Kazakh scholar volunteered and he had a car. So we made a joint arrangement. I would bear other expenses, he would drive. But while driving, it was around over 100 kilometers away. Kapchiga or lake or something is there beyond Almaty. So it took us a lot of time in searching and reaching out to that point on the banks of Ili River, because there was no defined route or road. It just passes through that sand dunes and other things in a zigzag manner, without any signboard, without any plaque or anything. Although on Tamgalita side, finally we reached at around 5 p.m. and we found it, and my Kazakh friend scholar, he was so elated to find, and he connected himself to this indigenous Kazakh, rich Kazakh cultural heritage, and he shared it with so many other people. So what I mean to say, Tamgalitas is again not so much in shambles as in Kaka fort and other forts, but it is not in good shape. Some rogue elements are putting stones on it. So there is need to restore it to a position so that people remember it, and it is again made a center of cultural tourism. So we all know that movement of trade, ideas and reciprocal cultural influences have left deep imprint on the social life and cultural traditions of this entire region. Indian spices are being, tea, medicinal herbs are in popular use throughout the region, and the quest for Indian films and songs is still strong, and this reflects age-old Indian connection. So what it is, this consciousness of historical and cultural association dating back to antiquity and permeating the psyche of the people of two regions, which provides a firm basis for constructive Indo-Central Asian cooperation in diverse sectors of social, economic development and other sectors. India views it, this region, as an area of, as its extended neighborhood, as an area of vital importance. So there is no dispute. So this mutual political understanding between India and Central Asian republics needs to be reinforced through synergy of thought and action between various government agencies, universities, institutions in the region, both in India and the Central Asian republics, so that the historical and cultural linkages between India and Central Asia are strengthened and developed into a fund of goodwill, love and harmony at the grassroots level. So, process of academic and cultural exchanges between India and Central Asian universities, institutes, think tanks needs to be streamlined, institutionalized. Then there is another area of, because Ambassador Verma in the morning mentioned about that they are working on, India is working on a production of a book about the dictionary of common. I remember 20 years back, 2001, when I and Professor Koching were in Makkah's Maulana Azad Institute. So we did work on this Hindi, but Uzbek and Hindi. Professor Verma, Professor Pandey of Hindi Department of JNU, and Azad Shamato of Tashkent. So we collaborated and brought out, the book was published. But it is a very good, it needs to cover other aspects. Similarly, the area of cultural cooperation is joint production of films, television serials, publication of books, exchange of print and visual materials, and regular exchange of artists and scholars. inclusion of specific chapters detailing India-Central Asia ties since ancient times, including focus on current ones, need to be included in the textbooks for schools and colleges both in India and respective Central Asian republics. This is not so difficult, right? It is not so, it will not consume so much of money, but only an initiative needs to be taken. So the task of identification, location, documentation and dissemination of such a rich historical cultural legacy assumes priority. The concerned institutes of archaeology, history and social sciences in Central Asia and India can jointly undertake this task, and concrete steps towards the actual documentation of antiquities and archaeological sites fit in well within the policy of independent Central Asian republics to discover their past and consolidate national identity on the basis of their indigenous ethno-cultural heritage. It is high time that all antiquities, frescoes, manuscripts, inscriptions, artifacts, etc., which are lying scattered across Central Asia, either at sites or in local museums, are documented. You know Balashugun in Kyrgyzstan, very important historical site. Somebody told me that tractors are plying over the site because it is crawling over a huge space. So there is a Buddhist monastic complex underneath. So upar the tractors or maybe so they are having some. So the urgent steps are needed to protect, conserve, restore and develop ancient sites in the region into important centers of cultural tourism. A specialized center involving experts, archaeologists, historians from the region can undertake the task. So these sites can be developed into important cultural and tourism spots, which in turn will promote tourism and traffic and also promote goodwill. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Professor Warikoo, and again for sticking to the time. I know you had a very extensive presentation, but what I really appreciate is that you were able to share your personal experiences about the different places, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan,
Nobody knows about those.
Tamgalitas. I think as Professor said right at the beginning that we really need to herald the return of culture. So here also when there are cultural sites, to preserve them, to protect them. I don't know when you visited Tamgalitas in Kazakhstan, but we also went, and I thought maybe if we had traveled together we could have taken you on a better route to the hieroglyphs, because I think when we were there they were protecting them, they were trying to cover them because the forces of nature, whether it is snow or it is rain or it is wind, meaning it has survived for, if my memory serves me correctly, itna purana nahi hai. It is not so old. It is, I think, Vakhanchuli Khanov, he is the one who was the historian who went there in the 19th century, and he wrote about it. But there are all sort of, on the rocks there are carvings.
Mongolian, Tibetan, and
Yes.
Sanskrit script.
And now they are covering them up. They are covering them up with plexiglass and others, so that the natural forces are not able to. Okay. So thank you very much, for bringing this out. But I think it really, not only in Central Asia but even in India, as far as culture is concerned, how can we protect it and keep it available for the future generations, but also to strengthen relations and to better understand our own history. So now to the final speaker, Professor Sanjay Pandey, Professor, Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, SIS, India Central Ties, Role of Soft Power. You have the floor.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh. Listening to various speakers since morning, one gets to know 2-3 things which present a paradox. The paradox is one thing that was said, and especially by Professor Warikoo, is the deep historical ties that India and Central Asia have. Since the morning, many of the speakers talked about continuous flow of people, culture, ideas, merchandise, of course, Buddhism and Sufism. So this is one reality. The other is, speakers talked about lack of connectivity and the obstacles that India faces in its interaction with Central Asian countries, which gives the idea that our interaction is not up to mark. Something which was left unsaid in so many words, but which is a reality. If you go by trade figures, between $2 to $3 billion of trade between all the 5 Central Asian countries and India. Compare that with China, 30 billion plus. So, paradox is, on the one hand, historical, civilizational, cultural ties, perhaps one of the most intense and deep, and at present, a very limited interaction between India and Central Asia. But one thing which comes out is that when it comes to people and cultural interaction, this has been very continuous and very strong. In the morning, something about mutual perception was talked about. Now here comes the role of soft power. And as the foremost scholar on soft power, Harvard Professor Joseph Nye defines it, it is an ability to attain desired results through the means of attraction instead of means of coercion or payments. He says that in the 21st century, success depends not only on whose army wins, but on whose story wins. So, storytelling, and I believe we Indians are good at it. Soft power is a way of getting others to want the outcome you want. Nye went on to talk about the 3 pillars of soft power, India's soft power, or soft power in general. It's culture, political principles, and foreign policy. Now, that brings me to what is India's soft power in Central Asia. In case of India, its soft power potential consists of its ancient culture and civilization, increasing recognition as the largest democracy, a plural, tolerant society, Gandhian principles of non-violence and satyagraha, and of course non-aligned movement. And in present times, India's ability to hold its own in the Ukraine conflict, the way India has trying to keep its while maintaining good relations with both the parties through the conflict. Now, about India, Central Asia, talking about paradoxes, till early 19th century, you read Pandit Mohanlal, the Kashmiri who went to Central Asia, you read Burns, along with Burns, and many other British travelers, and they would testify there was not a town, almost a village, which had no Indians in Central Asia. As traders and as money lenders, of course, they did not go along with their families, unlike the Central Asians who came to India and then settled down here, made it their home, and contributed to our rich culture. So this is one fact, but today we have barely 20,000 Indians living in Central Asia. Most of them are medical students, some IT professionals, some businessmen, that's all. So another paradox. I will not go into details. One of the presenters talked about our iTech program, other programs, ICSSR scholarships through which we invite Central Asian students. I have had a few Central Asian students working with me. But 2-3 fields in which we can really make a difference. One was talked about was tourism. And you talk about medical tourism, you talk about historical tourism, ecological tourism. In all these respects, Central Asia has excellent destinations. The infrastructure even if it is not further improved, is good enough, and it is extremely inexpensive. The problem is we simply don't have the information. We don't have sufficient flights. 4 countries might be connected, sir, but as far as I know, there are no Indian companies, carriers, who are operating in Central Asia. Only the Central Asian airlines are coming to India. There are no connectivity to historical towns like Samarkand and Bukhara. They are receiving significant Indian tourists in the last, in fact, just before the COVID, the numbers was going like 30,000 plus, but there are no direct flights. So the lack of information is there. So tourism is definitely one. Medical tourism, healthcare sector is one field where we have an edge. We are pharma superpower, as has been said. Indian medicines, Indian vaccines were very popular. In fact, during COVID times, we saw now King Charles using Namaste, and then the French president using Namaste as a non-physical way of greeting. Similarly, it was told that during the COVID times, Indian yoga, Indian dances were quite popular. Indian cultural centers by various names, Vivekanand Cultural Center or Lal Bahadur Shastri Cultural Center, they are running courses in Indian music, dance. These are quite popular in Central Asia. Ambassador Sajjanhar knows more than me. The other sector is education, where we can cooperate and collaborate in very significant ways. 2 of the Indian universities have opened branches in Uzbekistan. There are various other universities who have entered into MOUs. Indian hospitals are there. India created 150-bed hospital in Tajikistan. Medanta Group, some other groups are already operating, but there is still lack of information, lack of government support, which can really make a difference in these fields. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you also. So let me thank all my speakers for by and large sticking to the time limit and the time schedule. So let me now throw the floor open. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions, and then 2 or 3 minutes I'll take to give my own closing remarks. Yes, Yogi.
Thank you. Excellent discussion. And maybe I could speak for a lot more for various reasons. I just want to make a couple of quick points.
For you, not 8 minutes.
No, I know. I think not more than 1 minute, perhaps. Our ambassador in Uzbekistan, Bhaskar Mitra, he'd organized an international conference, which was actually a conference about India, Central Asia links pre-Islamic period. So, when you go back those links actually really go very far. And one of the things I picked up there, that the Buddhist doctrine of Sarvastivadin actually was developed in Central Asia. This is the route that we follow. The other one in Tajikistan, one of the professors tell me that they wanted a chair of Sanskrit there because for them to understand Zoroastrian, let's say, literature, Zoroastrian script, Zoroastrian their scriptures, they found that Sanskrit was very helpful. That's just one example. The other thing, of course, is that you find that the transcription, now because the language is quite similar, it is just that they use Cyrillic largely, because of which it becomes a problem like in India you know the same language but written in different script. That's something which we can do without any problem and thereby integrate the intellectual currents which actually have been there for quite a while. So that is something which can be taken. And I just give one other example how civilization handshake, and there's again, I go to Dushanbe. There we actually had 2 scholars, Persian speaking on Amir Khusro, and other one was a musicologist. So I sent them to the Institute for training Maqam singers. And the Maqam singers, they are trained with Bolshoi at one time, So they just went there and they said, okay, I said, you go and interact with them. So this guy from our side said, tell them, he said, give us one of your Maqam tunes. So they sang that. They said, here is the Hindustani raga, equivalent. And then another one. Then they said, another Hindustani raga. it went on for nearly 3 hours. So the Sawal Jawab, which actually took place there, it showed how close, and I could again go on, so close that these are the kind of links that we need to discover at the moment. Now, let me criticize MEA. Radha Rana's book on India, Central Asia, cultural ties, written in English language, sent to me in stacks. Who do I give it to? It could have been done in Tajik or even Russian, so people could read. So you find so much scholarly work being done, but nobody can use it. And that applies on both sides, because script becomes actually a problem. So the other thing is that we also need to, this is all nostalgia, we need to bring it to the modern phase of our cultural, let's say cultural products, information products, and try to see how we synergize and how synthesize that. So there actually I want to make one point, and that is actually we lack an effective external media policy. So what actually happens is a lot of the things that we are talking about, perception. Now perception is an issue as to what kind of media contacts we have. And our media contacts are actually practically nil. Here we need to work together. India has the capabilities. I've traveled, I was in Marshall Islands, you could still there download signal over an Indian TV channel. So what is Central Asia? It's not very far for us. So you need to develop that footprint and then develop common products, so to say, information products, cultural products, commercial products. Because people in Central Asia, they might think about Bedil and so on and so forth, but they know very little about what's happening here, and vice versa. So I think that's something that we need to work on, and again, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and you also, thanks for more or less sticking to the time limit of 1 minute. So that's true. Yes. Oh, first I want to call upon the ambassador. No, I think you are this is the first time that you are going to speak.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yes, in our job, when you need some new ideas, you should come to scholars and experts. And today is the day that full of ideas and new ideas coming on the table. And we have very rich discussion on many aspects of interaction between Central Asia and India. And just would like to add, which I already, on cultural ties, I already said a few words at the opening remarks, and just to make some additional notes that when we are talking about culture, maybe we need to have a broader perspective to look. It includes cuisine, it includes dressing, it includes art, it includes our tangible heritage like Buddhist and Sufist shrines. An idea is that to have more wider comprehensive view on cultural ties. This one is very important. And another aspect that indeed many speakers already mentioned that we have information gap and we need to fill it. And my understanding that if we try to do ourselves, embassies and governments, it will be very difficult. We need to engage private companies, mass media, government agencies, whoever interested and whoever can do, we should engage them effectively. It means we need some kind of crowdsourcing for revitalizing our cultural ties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Extremely useful ideas, and I'm sure the Director General and her colleagues have taken note of this, and going forward, I'm sure they'll put it into practice. Yes, Professor Gerkesh.
Just following the comments which mentioned by Professor Warikoo, you're talking about, and your Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar also mentioned that Tamgalitas, this is a place which has been inscribed at the UNESCO Heritage List, and now it's easily could be easily found. But what I'm talking, what I'd like to add is that we're talking today about the huge cultural heritage, and I think it's time in up for us, for both Central Asia and India, for all of us, to start so-called make practical implementation in the form of mapping. Why not? Because I'm closely associated with UNESCO as UNESCO consultant expert, and it came to me that there are UNESCO tangible and cultural and natural heritage lists of worldwide some monuments of artifacts and whatever of important, global importance. Why not to map all this importance relating to Central and South Asia, to put on the platform, to map, to make sort of cartography, so we could inscribe our own heritage list, be it natural, tangible or intangible, and in the sort of as following the UNESCO's structure, we could do this, and within the frames of any project or program, why not of ICWA's program, if you could initiate that, then I think that could be our practical input towards all these academic deliberations, and this platform could be useful for not only scholars or students or academia, but for all people concerned globally, and through this, that could be a weapon or tool towards disseminate our knowledge and make it visible globally in digital world. So that you also could boost tourism and cultural and other activities of within 5+1 or bilateral levels.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, I think this will be the, okay. 1, 1. So very short, very 1, okay. So 1, 1, 1. Very quick, very short comments.
Culture, literature, and all that, especially from Central Asia. I would like to know, as this lady pointed out, how many heritage sites, UNESCO heritage sites, have been recognized in all the 5 Central Asian countries? Number 1. And number 2, since the very much focus and emphasis is on culture, and that too under the Ministry of External Affairs, it will be worthwhile if a latest, a broad definition of culture also emanates from this worthy gathering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. The main point which I want to express here, it is unique spheres to find to make cooperation with India, Central Asia's country. Today is not right to say that Central Asia captured by any kind of countries economically, security, or culturally, or other sides. For example, in majority times, the people say that by security, the first country is Russia in Central Asia. By economy is China. By some, for example, human rights is European Union. But what is a unique platform to use India to make close cooperation with, for example, Central Asia's country? For example, in my country, going to the Europe and learning the English is very difficult. When my president in his speech says that going to the world, we must know English, every of young people in my country try to know English. But the India is the first country which is alternative of Euro countries to attract the attention of, for example, my country in a linguistic, as my ambassador said. But the first is moving from the theory to the practice. We have a lot of treaties, agreements, memorandums with other, for example, big powers. But the realizing of this, the institutions which rarely analyze, it's very difficult. But for example, today the unique, for example, act my ambassador here, my ambassador is the first ambassador from Central Asian country is here. But it means that me in Tajikistan really interested to make deep cooperation with, for example, India, and it's very important for us to do this. The second one is to really majority of, for example, speakers said about, for example, educational network. It is really important. For example, I have more 5 English, for example, publication or article, but it's not possible to publicate it in any kind of journal. But the India is very good opportunity for me to do this. That's why we hope that we must know the unique alternative of other big powers in Central Asia to make cooperation with this country. Why? Because China is near. Maybe some of speakers say that the border near is not so important. Yes, we must be very connected, and all our experience shows that historically we have deep cooperation with India, and it is a good platform, such kind of cooperation and holding of this cooperation to make to realize our plans. Thank you so much.
Just a quick point, and we should not lose sight of sports and something to excite younger people. And let me tell you, I personally know some families who are very ambitious for their children, and they've chosen world-class facilities in Central Asia to get their children trained in gymnastics and other sports. Yes, and gymnastics, you know, there's not a normal sport for India. So I think if now the World Cup football is going on, why not some, you know, exposure to for Indian footballers in Central Asia. So this is one area we shouldn't lose sight of.
Yeah, for boxing, yeah, we do have. So maybe we have this delegation from Central Asia, so we can construct a football team out of the delegation and have friendly matches. We can make this proposition to DG ICWA. So I think let me thank each and everyone for their contributions. We've had a very rich discussion, and maybe just as closing comments, let me make a few points. The first was, you know, with our friend professor from Kyrgyzstan, when he said that there should be a return to culture because of what the clash of civilizations had been prophesied. And I would like to take it back to that there was also an end of history prognosis. But so I think we also need to return to history. And when we are returning to history, then of course it is coming back to our India, Central Asia, very vibrant ties that have been mentioned. I think, you know, there was some reference to about comparison with some other countries, etc. I think, you know, as it is said many a times, comparisons are odious. And if there are comparisons to be made, we should compare them with ourselves. What we were yesterday, what we were day before, what are we today? And I think if today we are better than what we were yesterday and the previous week, then I think we need to be satisfied, and that can inspire us to go forward. I think in terms of the fact what existed in history and what exists now, I don't really see a contradiction in those terms. I don't see a dichotomy, because I think, you know, there are so many changes. Geopolitics is constantly in flux. And when geopolitics, you know, there are these uncertainties, there's such turmoil, such turbulence, then of course on the ground there are bound to be large number of changes. You know, you also, I think Professor Pandey mentioned about direct flights between. I think the facilities are there. We need to take advantage of that. Also, I can tell you, and I'm sure our friends from Central Asia will also testify to that, that when there is time, we have had chartered flights. You know, chartered flights during the summer months, whether it is to Goa, to Jaipur, etc. I know from Central Asia and definitely also from the Russian Federation, they have operated when, you know, the time has been there. But the point would be that whatever facilities are there, let us take advantage and let us have more of such flights. Because I remember when I was talking to the city manager of Air Astana, he said we have 14 flights per day between India and Kazakhstan, which is a large number. And so I think if those, Yogi, you mentioned about Radha Raina's books. You know, part of that are also in Russian. I know that when she had done, okay. When she did, I think Kazakhstan was her last book, and yeah, entire, and okay, yeah. So that was there. I think you asked about a definition of culture. So maybe, you know, what our colleague from Tajikistan, he mentioned that there should be art, cuisine, attire, history, sports. I think all that can definitely be added. And the number of heritage sites, I think we can all Google it and see, and you'll be able to find out. So I think with this, what has been mentioned right at the beginning, that it is not the physical connectivity, not the physical proximity, because this is a time of technology. And technology can really, overcome all these barriers and all these obstacles. So let me, with these words, say what a great pleasure it has been for me to moderate this session. Thank you very much to ICWA, DG ICWA, for getting us all together here. And thank you to all those who have contributed. Thank you.
Sir, excuse me, just to add one sentence that other than India, if we are talking about culture and people-to-people contact, other than India, if you really want to, the true word of Atithi Devo Bhava, I think Central Asia is the reason where you can have this kind of experience. I myself had this experience for 5 years. Yeah, exactly, sir. So now, we now begin with the last technical session. It will take few minutes to adjust seat arrangement. Excuse me.